So welcome to part 2 on the role that holism evolution can have in giving us insights for science education. So the first part, if you missed it, was looking at just some spiritual experiences, some which are well documented and known about, and others that I personally had. And some of the keys that I certainly am growing out of it, and you need to come to your own ideas, but that I'm growing out as to how the personality, the growing self, is slowly maturing and evolving to enable the incarnation or the manifesting of the next step of holistic evolution, which started with energy, then matter emerged from that, life emerged, then mind, personality growing self, and then spirit self, if the logic of Smuts and myself is correct. So you'll have to go back and watch part 1 if you haven't seen it. But what I did with part 1 is to look at the end of it, to look at these different portals of experience. And so I'm going to briefly go through them and then move into implications for science, or the insights for science education and education in general, actually. So how do we have experiences? And what types of experiences do we have? And what role does education play? So the first set of experiences that we have are what wells into our consciousness, into our awareness that comes out of the body. So these are the impulses and instincts, even one can say, the sex instinct, the sleep and rest, hunger, and so on. These biological events that take place inside well up into awareness, and then we respond to them. But there's also the external input that comes through the senses, and this is the sound and light and tastes and so on that we get from the outside world. Of course, there's much more than just that. There's a bunch of aesthetics and dynamics that we learn through the senses as well. But these are the two main areas where from inside the body and from outside the world, we get these stimuli, which bring us all kinds of interesting and important experiences. And then in education, not the young child, but certainly from kind of middle school time on, is the time for objective thinking. And this is what I call reason. And you can see I've placed it there. If you look at the smut substance at the bottom, between mind and the growing self, personality, between the animal and the human, because the animal represents the mind in terms of evolution, and then the human being is this manifesting, or the coming into the world of personality or the growing self. And so we know reason is a powerful and important way in which we distance ourselves from the world. We lose that immediate intimacy. We put it a little bit away so we can look at it carefully and be logical and rational and reasonable and objective. And hence, literally, we objectify. So there's a bunch of dangers associated with that too. But let's ignore that for the moment. Let's look at the positive of the power of reason that enables us to grow an understanding within ourselves. And that's what I call a reality with a W, this internal construct that we have of what is actually real and also of ourselves. And we're forever in the process of building this in an attempt to get closer and closer to actual reality. And the reasoning faculty and the logic and discipline of thinking and so on is a very important part of that process. Education, and science education in particular, is very involved in that, helping us to evolve, to become more mature as growing selves. And then from the part 1, I was looking particularly at what are some of the things, skill sets or faculties that we need to grow a faculty to perceive into the spiritual realm. So religions have been giving us insights for thousands of years, and many people have had phenomenal experiences through the insights and the emotional and intellectual space that religions have guided people, and the discipline. I mean, there are all kinds of practices that come out of various religions to awaken experiences, spiritual type experiences, as described in part 1. And I call that an empowered selflessness. So it's where the faculty of reason has done its job. We've really grown a strong, defensible reality, and and have a fullness and empoweredness of self, and releasing that presence into a compassionate relationship to nature, to others, to the world, to our work, where we release our attachments to the world we've come from and open up a door into this other world, into the spiritual realm, and such experiences can happen. And that's what I was speaking about in part one. So if you've missed that and are interested, please go back and have a look at that. So what are the things we're already doing in science education, and how can we look at them in a clearer way that we can understand are the key elements that will help the evolution of the human being, of the growing self, to enable this next stage of holistic evolution to happen. So I've put them in this highlighted block. The first and most important thing is the basic disciplining of mind, disciplining of our thinking, of our feelings, and of our doing. It's taking hold of each of those and structuring and ordering them and making them, shaping them, making them more empowered and capable for us to express and do and be in ways that we rationally have processed. Now, that involves a lot of work of self-examination and examining the world we grow up in, and examining, in science, examining the substances or things that we are addressing or looking into. But it's this disciplining quality, this transformation of just a natural, instinctive, intuitive relationship to the world, or an overly rationalized one. It's a disciplining, it's taking in hand that we begin working upon ourselves, because it's a way of maturing this growing self to be capable of this next step of holistic evolution. So part of that disciplining is generating a clear and unbiased capacity for detailed observation. And obviously science is very engaged in doing that. Clear objective perception, free from theory or preconceived ideas. Now, in science in the classroom, generally we're teaching the theory, but then that's not going to be particularly empowering for the students to develop that objective perception free from preconceived ideas, because that's a part of what my sense is required for the human being to evolve to the next step, is a liberation from attachment through the real empowerment of the individual to be able to figure this out for themselves, which is what the magic of science has always been anyway. So if we are teaching science and it's based on just teaching theory that kids have to learn, then from a certain point of view, we're being anti-evolutionary, certainly from the way I'm presenting. So developing logical reasoning and using cross-referencing of all data. And when I say all data, you can see I've gone into spiritual type experiences deliberately, because normally in science, we only think materialistically, and we've often eliminated the human experience and other types of experiences. And of course, that's just a limitation of data, and it's self-imposed and needn't be there. And from an evolutionary perspective, it seems like that's not actually a helpful or healthy thing. So really, all data, including one's own personal experiences and one's own belief structure. So there's a huge amount of work to empower oneself, liberate ourselves from preconceived ideas and biases and prejudices and so on. And then respecting lateral thinking associations. Now, this is not the undisciplined, so-called free thinking that one might often think. Like someone says something and someone automatically thinks of something else and think, oh, that's great. And then the conversation dissipates into some nether regions. This is a lateral thinking of holding things in the place and finding connections between them so that meaningful pictures, a meaningful reality can result. And this is the insight from Goethean Holism, if you've seen some of the previous videos. And of course, more Goethean insights here, feeling rich imagination, allowing the intuition to build these connections in this lateral thinking. So growing that reality, growing and maturing the growing self, our own selves, our personalities, to be ripe, mature, and ready for the selflessness of our own scientific work. Because, of course, if we just try and defend a favorite idea, well, then we might ignore deliberately certain data, and that wouldn't be helpful. So this highlighted block is the key of what I believe is the magic that we were already doing in science. And then if we just tweak our thinking a little bit, would be absolutely, from a teaching perspective, the teacher can hold this in mind and know that they are really working within their science education for the maturation of humanity and for their learners, empowering them for the future. So in science, we work on reason and this empowered selflessness, the two crucial faculties required for the capacity to release ourselves from biased personal attachments and to open ourselves to experiences otherwise hidden, like the inner laws of nature, which science is predominantly focused on, but then to enrich that experience, to also bring in the awareness of presences behind various phenomena. And there's some videos I've made as well in my Holism YouTube site on that, where I've written some poetry on the periodic table and so on to try and bring those elements out. But note, it'll only happen if we allow for the space to liberate ourselves from the materialist limitations that we put there normally with science, and also the dogma. And science has plenty dogma, but of course religions and cultures and every worldview has its own dogma that seems like boundaries that you can't cross or the world will reject you. But actually we need to empower human beings to be able to do that. And you'll see in the last slide quite how I envisage that. So the implications for science education, and in fact all of education, emphasize the development of student skillfulness and confidence. And that's crucial part here, that we are wanting to empower our learners to really be skillful and confident in what? Well, that's open-minded, selfless, objective reasoning, compassionate, full presence engagement, and passionate in that as well, not just compassionate, but a real presence of feeling empowered, and then in cross-referencing multiple data sources from religion and science, which is, of course, my research field, but cultural elements and so on as well. And of course, from a teaching perspective, if we can find assessment strategies to reward these particular skills, magnificent, because that's what's going to make it valid, and that's what will make the students value them as well. But of course, we have to be careful. There is a danger here because we're looking at human faculties rather than just knowledge. And although in science we do test them, and certainly in mathematics we test human faculties, so there is the space for that. We have to be careful that it doesn't become a judgmental thing where people feel they are worthless. But that's already a challenge in science and maths education, as those of you in the field will know. And finally, encourage autoethnographic work. What is autoethnographic work? It's work on one's relationship, knowledge of self in relation to the world you live in. And that's really important in terms of this evolutionary step. And science is perfectly placed to do it because of the demand for objectivity that we have in our work. But at the same time, if we use those faculties, and we can do it in the science classroom, I do it from occasion, from time to time, and that empowers the students within their own ethnographic environment to release them from biased attachment to the social, cultural, and religious inheritance that they've had. And this is the crucial part, while fostering a warm intimacy and appreciation for the gifts. So this is not this objective rationality of judgmentalism. This is the objective rationality with that intimacy of relationship where you can really separate out these gifts I value. These are the limitations, and I breathe through those. And that's what we really want in this evolutionary sequence, because otherwise that compassionate connection and intimacy, which is crucial for our perceiving in the spiritual realm, if the religions and my understanding are correct, that would be lost. And so, of course, that wouldn't be evolutionary healthy. And finally, to create or weave new stories about reality that our students can build independently and in the classroom dynamic, to enable that based on well-tested facts and personal experiences. And here I love this, an excited, perpetual openness to new facts and insights. And that opens the doors to understanding. Scientifically, we know how many magnificent scientific insights have come from such a process. And of course, perception into the spiritual realm, I believe, at the same time. So I hope that's been interesting and useful. If you are a science teacher, I hope it gives you some exciting stuff to be thinking about and working on. And if anyone would like to contact me, you're most welcome to do so. I'm sure it's not that hard to find me. I work at the University of Pretoria, and I'd be most interested to work with anyone who's keen to use some of these ideas. So thank you very much, and all the best in your work. I hope the video was interesting.